Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to another episode of Life with Shenita. I am Shenita Connolly, your host for this evening, and I am glad that you are here with us this evening. This topic tonight on mental health is going to be life-changing. I am grateful to have two individuals who are experts in this area of focus, and they are going to share some valuable information that we may be able to use on a personal level or a professional level. So please like and share this post. Mental health is so important. We all want to make sure that we are mentally healthy as we navigate not only through life, but specifically through this pandemic. It has been a challenging period of time for us, and we just want to make sure, I personally, and this will be my third conversation on this show about mental health because I think it's that important. I want to make sure, as well as the subject matter experts tonight, that people understand what triggers, what things to look for, what possible solutions that are available for you and me as we continue to navigate through life, because death can cause some mental health challenges. And one for me, and I'll use my own self as an example, when my husband had a heart attack in front of my eyes on June 30th, 2015, it was devastating, very traumatic. I didn't know if I would even recover from that. And so, on a personal level, it was a choice not only to continue to live once God spoke to me, but I have to continue to talk to myself. I have to continue to read. I have to do mental checks myself. I actually had a therapy session just this past January for 8 sessions for myself. And so I want to make sure that we understand the importance of not denying ourselves the opportunity to take care of our mental state of being. So that's why this is so important. So with that being shared, again, I ask that you would like and share this broadcast this evening. Thank you again for joining us. And the topic this evening is on mental health as it relates to, specifically as it relates to parenting and finances in the family unit. So without further delay, I am going to invite our guest in and I will introduce them once they come in. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Mary K. Matthews. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
so much.
joining. And next we have Mr. Everett Tolbert. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Welcome. So excited to have you both. And so I want to take a minute and introduce you all to the audience so they know exactly who they are speaking with or listening to. They can chime in the comment section of this StreamYard broadcast. And hopefully if they have additional questions, they can put them there. And I will certainly ask you all the questions and hopefully we'll answer whatever may be left uncovered. So Dr. Mary K. Matthews is a proud native of Chicago, Illinois. She knew at a young age that God called her to help others and, in obedience, developed a strong passion for psychology and pursued academic training in the area of mental health. After graduating summa cum laude from Tennessee State University, TSU, Dr. Matthews continued her journey to becoming a psychologist by enrolling in the Chicago School of Professional Psychology's Clinical Psychology Doctoral Program, also known as BOP. She found her niche for addressing the mental health needs of undeserved populations. Dr. Matthews would go on to be hired as a staff psychology with BOP and later be promoted to drug abuse program coordinator. She joined the Department of Veterans Affairs in 2013 as a local recovery coordinator, and in 2017, Dr. Matthews was appointed as the Director of Substance Abuse Treatment Programs, also known as SATP, where she continues to practice today. In addition to her professional duties with the VA, Dr. Matthews graciously serves as a ministry leader for the Kingdom Counseling Ministry at Kingdom Life Christian Ministries Incorporated, under the pastoral leadership of Apostle Tyrone McCrary and Pastor Tanya McCrary. Christ has always been at the center of her why, and she continually looks for ways to introduce him to others while also educating them on ways they can obtain freedom from mental and emotional anguish. Dr. Matthews has been active in her local community as an advocate for social justice and partakes in motivational speaking engagements. She also aspires to publish her original collection of poetry, write children's books, expound upon the literature that advises on the mental health treatment of individuals with chronic illness such as HIV and AIDS. Losing a close family member to this disease forever changed her outlook on the impact of loneliness, unaddressed sexual trauma, the dangers of secrets, and the importance of providing unconditional love and support within families. Dr. Matthew is a proud member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Above all, she identifies God and her 7-year-old son, Charleston, as her constant motivation in living a life of service and embodying servant leadership. Dr. Matthews recently married the love of her life, Lionel Matthews. She is sincerely looking forward to serving side by side with him and fulfilling their joint purpose as a kingdom couple. I love it. Welcome, Dr. Matthews.
Thank you for having me.
Next, Mr. Everett E. Tolbert is a highly skilled licensed professional counselor who specializes in crisis management and intervention with clients who are experiencing mental health challenges such as depression, trauma, anxiety, crisis management, and substance abuse. He graduated from Albany State University with a bachelor's degree in sociology and possesses a master's degree in professional counseling from South University. Currently, Mr. Tolbert is the area site director for the Georgia Health Partners, a community counseling provider agency under the division of the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. He also operates his own private counseling practice, E. Tolbert Counseling and Consulting LLC. In addition to his counseling work, he is an adjunct instructor in the Human Services Department at Columbia College. Mr. Tolbert began his professional career as a corrections officer in Southwest Georgia in 1996. Since then, he has worked in various capacities throughout the state of Georgia, including the Department of Corrections, the State Board of Pardons and Paroles, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, as well as Gateway Community Service Board, where he serves as the program director of the Trauma Recovery Veteran-Based Program. His professional experience encompasses work that has assisted clients with life challenges that include HIV and AIDS, substance abuse, and trauma recovery. He also has extensive experience working with veterans and their families. With more than 20 years of experience, Mr. Tolbert has demonstrated a passion for serving. He is the district deputy for the 1st Masonic District of Georgia, Prince Hall Masons, and Order of Eastern Stars, and a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Through his work as a professional and a private citizen, Mr. Tolbert remains committed to changing lives in the community and abroad. He is the wonderful father of 3 beautiful children. So, welcome, Mr. Tolbert.
Welcome. Hello. Hello.
You all have some amazing background, specifically in this area of mental health. So I am excited to have a conversation with you both. There are so many similarities with your bios. I'm just amazed. The veteran piece, the passion for the HIV and AIDS, the fraternity and sorority.
Amen.
So yes, so I am so excited. I'm sure the people will be blessed by this conversation. So let's get started. Let's talk about an icebreaker. So I love to get started and kind of break the ice. So the question of the evening is: if you had to describe the color gold to a blind person, how would you describe that color? Let's start with you first, Dr. Matthews.
Yes, ma'am. So I would tell this individual that gold it's bright, it's captivating, that it's empowering, and it's definitely valuable. And I would say that it's rich, so both in wealth and in content or quality.
I love it. I love it. It definitely has a rich essence to it. I love gold.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, Mr. Tolbert.
Can I be that? Can I be that student in class? Be like, what she said. Can I do that? I can't do that. No, actually, that's a very interesting icebreaker, and it definitely required a little thought. I was like, how do you describe gold to a blind person? Because they've never seen any colors. So how do you do that? But we do know that as human beings, we operate off of our senses. So we have our hearing, smelling, tasting, all this stuff encompasses who we are. So a person who has no sight, their other senses are enhanced. So being able to describe something to them that relates to their senses would actually help them with describing what gold would look like for them. So we know that gold is soft. We know that gold is yellow. So how would I describe something that would be yellow? How would I be able to help them with seeing what, or knowing or feeling what yellow is? So I would describe something like the sun being bright and it being warm. And so something like that they can actually imagine something bright, something that, that illuminates light. So that would be the gold part and as far as the feeling part, something that's solid or smooth. So I would give them something that they can touch that's soft and smooth, that they can say, okay, so if you hear the word gold, you can imagine this is what gold would look like for you.
Yeah.
Yes, you walk them through that. I love it. I actually have a friend who is blind but wasn't born blind. He became blind through the military. And so every time I think of this question, I think of him because he does have some sense of color from the time prior to becoming blind. But I love the fact that we can really be descriptive to a person who may not have ever seen before. And it makes us think, right?
Yeah,
Really,
absolutely.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
thank you for that. So let's get started with this conversation about mental health. But I would love for you guys to share some statistics, so we can set the tone for this evening. I want to make sure people understand the stats. So, Dr. Matthews, would you share some statistics for us related to mental health?
Absolutely. So one of the first things I'm going to share is just our doctor visits, those individuals who are actually going into the office for mental health related concerns. And so between the years of 2019 and 2020, we have 56.8 million individuals or Americans, who visited doctors' offices for mental health disorders in particular. Also, as we know, suicide being on the rise, there's 47,511 suicide-related deaths in that time period, 2019 to 2020.
Wow.
Wow.
A lot.
Wow.
I will, when I think of suicide, most recent in my neighborhood, there was, I think she was 13
Yeah.
year old little girl who had literally just gotten off the bus a few hours, maybe not even an hour, maybe an hour and a half before she hung herself in her bedroom. And so I think she had been teased at school over a period of time. She had been seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and boom, came home from school and committed suicide. Her mom, of course, was devastated. I remember we watched this that night. And so we have to really take this matter very seriously. And that's why I'm having this conversation a third time, because we need to know the signs. We need to know where to go, what to say, when to say, whatever it is, and not be ashamed that we're taking care of our mental state of being, because the mind is where everything flows.
That's right.
So, Mr. Tolbert, you have some stats too that you wanted to share.
I do. I wanted to talk about the morbidity of mental health, and that's just the people having the condition of mental health. So when we look at this, and I'm going to talk about adults and over the age of 18. When we look at that as well, and that's somebody who's worrying, nervousness, anxiety, all the things that we can think of when it comes to mental health, we looking at 11.2% of that age range who suffer with some type of mental health issues, and also the percentage of adults 18 over with just regular feelings of like depression. And that's another topic in itself, talking about what is depression, because sometimes we misdiagnose that as well. But 4.7% of that age range has that as well. But I want to add something else on top of that. All right, when we look at mental health issues, this is kind of like a myth, but a fact, and a fun fact that goes along with it. It says mental health don't. It says the myth was mental health doesn't affect me, but when we look at it, one out of 5 Americans experience a mental health issue. 1 out of 5. And so we imagine
1 out of 5.
1 out of 5. So we imagine the population of the United States alone. 1 out of 5 American adults experience a mental health issue. That says a lot. That says a lot. All right. 1 out of 25 Americans live with a serious mental illness.
Now that's huge. Huge. And particularly in this pandemic, I'm sure that it's probably gotten worse. I've heard some stories on the news. I've heard some personal stories of situations since we've been in this COVID-19 environment since last year. And so we need to take this matter seriously, because we are here moving about and doing and living as if we are okay. And many times we're not okay. Yeah. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I know we're going to talk specifically this evening about the family unit and parenting as a couple, and as it relates to money and finance. So what can you guys share about all of this talk about mental health during the pandemic? And what is mental health? Kind of like take them back to the beginning so they understand what mental health is and what's all this talk about it, particularly during this pandemic.
Go ahead, doctor. I'll let you go first.
So mental health, definitely, it refers to our psychological well-being. Okay. So just as we have our spiritual health, our physical health, our mental health will be those things, how we process information, how we behave, how we respond every day, even to everyday situations. So it's going to be your stressors. It's going to be those things such as our mood, our temperament. So it's something that we definitely want to be mindful of. Do we want to do checks and balances on? And, you asked a really important question in terms of, why now? There's nothing really special about now other than the fact that it has been brought to our awareness now. So what the pandemic just did was highlight what was already there, what has already been present. We didn't give it much attention because of shame, sometimes because of guilt, stigma, even denial. But in our communities, especially in our, Black and Brown communities, we need to have these conversations because it's most prevalent in our cultures. So the time is now. And what it's done is also exposed our heart, our fears, our anxieties, our faith, and sometimes our lack thereof. So that's why we're hearing so much about it right now, because the cat's out of the bag. Everything is on the table.
Yes. I love the fact in your bio you talked about family secrets.
Oh, yes.
And so, I truly believe that we need to deal with it at the core and not be ashamed. It is what it is, right?
That is true.
And that's the only way that we can overcome is if we face it and deal with it. So you're right. I think that the pandemic has just really exposed what was happening on a broader level. So thank you, Mr. Tolbert.
I agree exactly with what the good doctor just said. Mental health does affect us on our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. And if you look at it, this is just what's happened during this pandemic. How we relate to stress, how we make our choices, how we relate to others. All this has been exposed during this pandemic. And so our mental health has been put to the test. How do we actually deal with things as a society? Even on the top levels of government, if you look at it, their stress level, how their mental health has been put to an extreme, and that affects, as it comes down, it affects those in society who are looking for leadership and looking for things that how do I relate to this? How do I govern myself? How do I manage? And if we see things from the top that are not operating correctly, as the ebb flows from the topic, to the skirts of the garment, is like, oh my God, what is going on? Yeah. So it has this whole thing, mental health. And it's funny because when we hear the term mental health, it's funny because we automatically assume that that's a negative term, and it's not necessarily a negative term when you talk about mental health. So there's differences between your mental health and mental illness. So my mental health is just like going for my physical health, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but
absolutely,
yeah, absolutely,
and it needs to be attended to, right?
Absolutely,
because everything starts in the mind. And so I have another question that I would like to ask about the impact of not having a healthy mental state of being. What impact does that have on a child as a parent? So I'm a parent and mentally I'm not in a good place. And I remember at years ago, as a young mom, not wanting to be divorced from my husband and single mom. And I was not in a good mental place. And I remember going to a therapist in 1990 and taking my oldest to a therapist because this was all new for her to not be with the family nucleus that she had grown to be accustomed to. I wasn't ashamed of that. And even today, I'm not ashamed. But the impact that it has on children, let's talk about that because it can be life changing and it can be a stamp that stays if something doesn't happen for that child along the way. So let's talk about the impact in the home, the parents, the impact of them not being mental healthy, the children, and the finances. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Okay, I'll go first in this
one. Okay.
So I'm under the assumption that everything is a learned behavior. That's just kind of how I operate. I think we get into a pattern of behavior, but I think most of what we do is learned behavior. The kids that I have experienced and in my practice that I've experienced, kids are affected by their environment. They're affected by what they see and what they learn, what they understand from their parental figures. So if the parent isn't mentally stable, kids absorb that. Kids absorb when a parent is stressing. Kids absorb when a parent is going through tough times and they're not mentally stable with their being. So how does that affect the child? Well, you got to think about it. If the mother is stressing about how I'm going to feed my child, how I'm going to pay the light bill, how I'm going to do certain things, when the child goes to school, they're carrying that with them at school. So there could be a point where the child is having periods where they're not able to pay attention or they're not focused. And you're wondering why. It's like, okay, well, this child has ADHD. Well, not necessarily. This child may be having a lot of stressors going on at home that they just don't, as a child, how do I cope with that kind of stuff? How do I put those things together? And I'm still in these stages of development where I'm trying to figure things out. So there are stages in our stage of development that we may experience things that may cause mental health issues in those stages, but early on, that's a very critical stage. So as a child, if I'm seeing something in my home, that's definitely going to affect me as a child in that home and how I operate and how I function in society.
Absolutely. I believe that a child is a product of their environment. And so if that environment is unstable mentally, physically, financially, it could have a lasting impact. We know some people have overcome, being in some of those environments, but it is definitely makes it challenging or more challenging for that child as they navigate through life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Matthews, you want to add to that? That was a great response, Mr. Tolbert.
Thank you.
Certainly was. I could not agree more. I think that what we're essentially talking about is just that vicarious learning that, our children, they pick up what we are putting out. So they're definitely very sensitive to their parents' emotional state, to your cognitive state. And what they learn about societal and social norms happen to be from their parents first, and then at school, so those individuals who they are around the most. One of the things we want to keep in mind, too, is that the different, models of how mental illness manifests or the onset. So we still have biological models that are definitely gaining more traction, and that we're seeing that parents who, were depressed while pregnant, mothers who were depressed, I should say, while pregnant, are passing that on to the baby. So these individuals, they don't have colic necessarily. It's, hey, listen, this was the environment in the womb. So I'm more anxious. I'm more hypervigilant. We see that manifest and even, emerge as an adult. So now I'm very anxious when it comes to interacting with people. There wasn't anything that, necessarily made me that way as far as my experiences, but this is something that, again, a parent could have passed on. So we want to be mindful of that. Just like we know there are certain personality types that coincide with how we handle finances. All of that, our children are paying very close attention to it. What they learn about money, the importance of it, or even those who are more, I'm just going to spend freely. It's what's happening in the home. And is it during a manic episode that my parents are going shopping or that they're bringing, drugs into the home? What's happening? Your child is looking and saying, this is how I behave when I'm stressed, or this is how we celebrate. This is the norm. And then they're going to pass that on. So here we are, generation after generation, picking up these same bad habits or good habits, all depending upon what's being modeled.
Absolutely. I was a facilitator of a curriculum called Parents as Teachers. And when parents understand whether that's a good message or a negative message, we are teaching our children something. And so you're right. I do believe also when we are carrying in our womb that child, it takes on whatever the disposition mentally, physically that we, the mom, is. And I think a lot of people are now aware of that. I've seen how they've changed, how they carry their children. They understand that. And so we have to be very mindful of what that looks like while we're carrying that unborn child. When we think of the financial dynamics, tell us some behaviors that we may see when we're not mentally healthy in the home. What does that look like for some families? What have you seen?
So some of the things that, I've seen for sure would be buying food or when I say food, I'm speaking more so out at restaurants instead of the necessities to fill the refrigerator in the home. So doing things that are not essential. So McDonald's, Applebee's, all of that, when we don't have milk, we don't have water, we don't have bread at home, or buying, again, shoes, clothing items, paraphernalia that you don't necessarily need and not paying the bills. So that's one of those red flags. All right. Giving away money freely as well, knowing that, hey, my child is in need. So that's some of the things that children, they look at. And when we look at neglect, it's not necessarily that they don't have a roof over their head. It's, again, what's my day-to-day life looking like? Are my needs being provided? What's being, again, spent unnecessarily versus are we doing college funds? Are we making sure that, again, the needs are being met long-term so there can be stability within the home?
That's awesome. Awesome.
Absolutely. Only thing I can add to that is just that some of that financial responsibility where, a parent may become more focused in on self rather than the need of the child. And that can show a lot of instability with the parental structure in the home. So if I'm more focused on my self need, whether it's clothes or, giving money to a boyfriend, whatever it may be, then I'm definitely not in the right frame of mind, and that can definitely affect the household and the child.
Yes. And when I think of couples, you have a husband and a wife, or you have a couple, man and a woman, who may not be married but living together, and one is healthy and one is not healthy, but they've never sat down and talked about what does this need to look like for us as a couple. And so one may have some behavior that we kind of aforementioned, and some may be going the other one may be going in a good direction, but how are they going to meet in the middle? What would you suggest to that couple? What would you say if they were in your office talking with you and that was the problem? We're having some financial challenges with each other. Would you sit them down and talk about the value? How do you value money? What of course, I know you would assess the behavior, but what would you say to them?
I think looking at that impact on the family dynamic for sure is going to be important, and asking them, tell me what's going on in your household right now. Is this the way you envisioned it when you all first got together? Because that's important. You can have all the advice in the world, but the couple, they have to be able to receive it. They have to be in a place where they want to change, and what's important, it has to be important to them. So just making sure that they have buy-in, that they see a need for change to occur. And then what you just really said was, hey, let's identify the goals, let's outline it, and let's show how you're going to track this. How are you going to get there to that end result that you're looking for? And, children are they're so important to the family because that's tugging at the heartstrings. So even if I can't do it for myself, I can do it for my son. So using your children as motivation, and hey, what type of future do you want them to have? 20 years from now, they come to you, Mom, Dad, I'm in this same situation. Do we want that generational curse? Or do we want to set them on a path where they can truly succeed? And if we want to do that, we have to change the behaviors now.
Absolutely. Mr. Tolbert?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. With that, we look at, the behaviors that we learn, even, how we deal with finances. Where do we learn that behavior as far as, how do I spend money? How do I balance my checkbook? How do I manage my bills? Those are things, again, I go back, I just feel like that's learned behavior when we look at how we do things. So when we partner with somebody, we're bringing what we know in with what they know. And if we're on two separate fields, it's not going to balance out right. But I think part of that can happen, that can be good for a couple, is to first, definitely identify your goals. But also I would look at, how do we find that balance? Like who's, what's my strength? What's your strengths? And then we can identify what needs to be done as far as how do we manage our finances. So with some households, they like to do this, this whole 50-50 thing. That sounds good in theory. All right. But, the 50-50 may be so more like a 80-20, just depending on where my strengths are at. So if my strengths are, how I manage money, I can save money. We can generate, some additional things, with what we're doing with our income. And that's my strengths. I think having your partner come along to understand what you're doing, but that's your strength, that would be what you identify with. That's part of your 50. And if my other, the other person, that's not their strength, but their strengths are, how do we go out and shop for certain things? That might be their 50. So, you bring that to the table and you learn how to balance that out, then we'll know this is what we can do. Because if I like to go shopping and buy stuff, but this other person's good at managing stuff. If I go out, you know what? I see something for X amount of dollars and I want to get it. And they're like, listen, wait a minute. We may have it, but we're working on something. Like,
Right.
okay, well, then maybe I can go back and shop again and find something that may be more economical from where we are.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think, when you enter into a relationship or a partnership with someone, you got to remember your teammates. And as you said, if you're on two different fields, based on how you were raised or what you believe in. I grew up in a home where I saw my parents work together financially. It was no 50-50, nothing. It was, we put our resources together and we're going to work this thing together. So for me, it was important for me to marry someone that understood that, and we'd be on the same page with that. But I've also heard, particularly during this pandemic, where people have gone overboard spending, especially Amazon. And I don't know if it was because we're bored and this is my behavior before the pandemic, but I will be out shopping. And so now that I'm in and I'm stuck in, so now the best next thing is to shop virtually. And I've heard that it has caused some problems even before the pandemic, and now. And so what will we speak to those individuals? What will we say to them that are watching today or tomorrow or next year to help them get on track with each other, to help them do an assessment of their own mental state, because it could be a mental challenge that's causing them to shop something that they've not dealt with? Family secret, trauma. What will we say to them?
I love that question. You got to know your why. You have to actually sit down and have that reality check and understand the function of the behavior. So sometimes it could be loneliness, but I want to go just a little bit deeper. Have we considered self-worth as well? Sometimes we buy things to make ourselves feel better in the moment. So if we've lost a loved one, if we've gone through a breakup, if we're not going to the job, like we used to do, but maybe you're working virtually, we have to be able to name that behavior, name the function of it, why we're doing it. And once you can see what need is being met through that behavior, now we know how to tackle it. We know what to talk about in counseling if it is mental health related. We know what to talk about as a couple if it is a need not being met in that relationship or in that marriage. These are, what the pandemic really did was afford us the opportunity to become greater connected to the ones who we are living with, to our family, constellation. So let's start having these discussions about what I'm not happy with, instead of keeping that secret and pretending like everything is okay, but I'm going to do these behaviors on the side, which we know that's not you. It is hurting the household. So we have to open our mouths and talk, because these are the ones who we love. These are the ones who we trust. And the time is now. The opportunity has been afforded to us.
And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I think about the movie Tyler Perry, Why Did I Get Married? And you remember Perfect Patty or Perfect Janet?
Oh,
and
wow.
so I oftentimes think about that, where people won't talk. So I've always been an advocate to talk about it. I talk about it in my Facebook posts. I know what I need to do. See, like, I know me. And so I talk about it. I share, I get it out. And I know many people who don't know how to share and get it out and release it so that they can feel better. Because sometimes hearing it out loud, seeing it, reading it helps you really deal with it, whatever it is. Because we all have issues and challenges that could take us over the edge. And so we've got to figure out, if you don't want to talk to a counselor, write it in your journal. Do something to help you get it out and process it, so that you can understand, as you said, your why. Why am I doing this? I remember when my husband died, I was shopping like a maniac. Because why? I was in pain. And that, for a temporary moment, helped me forget about, or minimize, not forget, but minimize the pain that I was going through. But it didn't eliminated.
That's right.
So once that behavior changed, the pain was still there. And so I saw it in some other ways. And so we have to really deal with our ish. And I always say ish. We must deal with it, or it will deal with us. So, Mr. Tolbert, you want to share?
I shop a lot on Amazon, so I don't know if I should say anything on this one right here. Well, something on my doorstep right now. No,
do you need it?
Do I need it? That's what. Do I need it? Yeah, do I need it? There's certain things in my life that I have a passion for, and I do sometimes. I see it, I want it, I'll go get it, and maybe I go overboard with it. I think the thing that we have to this is a part of kind of finding a balance, and I like with you and Dr. K are saying, you're kind of finding your why and finding, know what that ish is. Some of the behaviors that we have are not really unhealthy behaviors. We just have to manage them that, they don't become, but they become unhealthy the way that we are managing them. So, shopping, hey, for some, shopping is a good thing. People like to shop and they like nice things. So it's good that you can go in sometimes, and that can be just a thing like, oh, I just like looking at new stuff around here and it looks good. But if I'm obsessive with it, if I'm doing it to cover a behavior, and that's what's soothing me. But then when I'm done shopping and I go somewhere else, everything comes back up. Then now, there's an issue there that we need to actually deal with. And I like that what you guys are saying. Find that why, find what that issue is, and deal with that. So, people like to work out, but sometimes people get a little obsessive with working out. It's like, okay, why are you working out so much? What's going on here? And I know people who suffer with obesity who work out a lot, and they're just like, I can't go back to where I was. And they're like, the way they eat, the way even the way some of them talk, you're like, oh my gosh, we really need to talk about that. Let's bring that back a little bit. So I get exactly what you're saying, and that's part of what this pandemic has kind of exposed a little bit too. I'll be interested to see what some of the online sales are for Amazon. I know it's through the roof, probably just crazy what it is. But it's put us in a position where now we are, everything that we do is kind of being exposed. So if I like to shop, but then I'm shopping because of something that that I may be covering up, I'm going excessive with it. So I'm spending extra money, and now it's looking like, oh my God.
Right. And it can cause some issues in that dynamics in that home. Now we're fighting. Now we're not talking to each other. The kids are picking up on it. Or we're not intimate anymore with each other. All kinds of things start surfacing as a result of that. And so that's why it's so important to communicate, to talk. And there are ways that, we can have these conversations in a healthy manner, in a loving way, where it's not antagonizing or disrespectful, because tough conversations can be healthy conversations. They're necessary. As we're talking about that, what do I do when the mental health support doesn't help me? Tell me what do I do when I've gone to therapy? I've done the next level and it's not helping me. What do we do at that point?
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. I got it. All right.
Okay, so I'm right with you now. Let we go.
Yeah. The very first thing that came to my mind was just that insight, was that we have to have insight to, was I receptive to the help that I was receiving? Was I motivated to change at that time? Because those could be some of those precursors that's making it very hard. But at the same time, I'm going to say, just be persistent. Sometimes it's not that first therapist that you sit down with. You have to, there is goodness of fit, there is, hey, do you understand me? What's going on in that therapist's life? We have to really talk about that too. So just like you wouldn't continue to go to the same primary care physician who's prescribing you things that you don't need, you're coming in and your symptoms are still there. Same thing, if you're not making any movement, and we want to see, when I say movement, we want to see certain things such as like your assessments. We want to see numbers improve. We want to see behavior start to change. It's not going to be immediate, but your patience and persistence is going to be key.
Mhm.
Never give up. Never give up. You know, even when it comes to prayer, let's look at some other things that we can incorporate. So maybe it's not therapy alone, and maybe don't forget that there's different level therapists. So you have your doctoral level, you have your master level clinicians. Each of them come with that skill set. So find out what's right for you. And don't forget about our pastoral counselors. Look at it that way, because maybe it can be, honestly, what I can do in the VA versus what I do at Kingdom Life is very different.
Mhm.
At the VA, I'm not bringing, even though I have Christ in me, I'm not bringing that out in a lot of my sessions unless my clients are asking for it, if they're very specific. But what I love about ministry is that's exactly what they need to hear.
Mhm.
Everything is based upon the word as well as your academic, expertise. So find out that balance, find out what type of counselor you need, and then maybe we will see some changes. But be persistent, never give up. We want to ask, we want to seek, we want to knock.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to piggyback off of that, Mr. Tolbert, what can we do to prevent severe mental health or just mental health issues? What can we do?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, because I don't know if you can prevent mental health, because it's like trauma. We don't ask for trauma. Trauma happens. It's an unplanned event.
Mhm.
So I always tell my patients, you may not be responsible for what happened. You are responsible for how you recover from it. So you're responsible for how you move forward from this point on.
Mhm.
So that's part of it. Being consistent is definitely there. Finding the right fit is definitely there. If my support that is not there like I want it to be, again, you're responsible for where you are. So if you allow that to deter you from where you are, then we're going to have a lot of downfall from where we are. So I think people sometimes, even going through the mental health piece where they're trying to get help, I think that's the piece that's lacking. Is like sometimes we have one support and we rely too much on that one support, and it can actually wear that support system or that support base out, like wear it out. And they're like, I just can't do this no more.
Absolutely.
And they may feel like now I'm all alone, but in actuality they're not. But what they've done is they made the other person responsible for their recovery or for their healing. And that's something that we have to, I try to help with my clients. Let's take responsibility for where we are.
Right.
And I'm going to motivate you to continue to take responsibility so that you'll feel better and you'll make the decisions for where your life is going. I always tell my clients, I don't have your answers. You have the answers within you. The thing is, I'm just going to be here to help with, identifying those answers so that we can put them in perspective so you can begin your healing process.
And do the work. Because one of the things that my therapist said to me earlier this year was, you're going to have to do the work. And we know that the work could be varied types. If we're dealing with eating disorders, we're going to have to do the work to kind of balance that thing out. So there's some work that's going to have to be done in that area. You know what I mean? If it's excessive spending, then there's some work that's going to have to be done. We might have to disconnect from Amazon.
Oh, did you say that? I got lightheaded.
Don't get lightheaded. You can shop until you drop.
I'm messing with you. Yeah. I need my golf material. I need a lot of my golf stuff out of Amazon. So don't do that to me. I can't just.
Well, the beauty of your situation is that you're a single man, and so you don't have to bounce that purchase off of anyone. So that's a wonderful thing in the process. And I'm sure you're smart enough to know that, handle your business first.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yes, so mental health cannot be avoided. Mental health issues cannot be avoided because life happens.
That's right.
And I love the fact that you said we have to be able to respond differently to life's challenges. That's how this show came about, is God said to me, you have to help people overcome life's challenges and choose to live a vibrant life. We didn't say it had to be perfect. So when I lost my husband, it was very devastating and traumatic, but he began to speak to me and said to me to live. And so I'm trying to live. And as I'm living, I'm trying to help others choose that same path, because we could all just kind of succumb to whatever we're dealing with. But we have to make a choice to do things differently. And so I want to ask you both, as we're preparing to close, is there any advice that you all would give to the audience as it relates to their mental health state of being? Speak to our parents who might be single, who might be coupled, who might be married, who might be a widow, who might be a widower. Speak to them in a manner as if they're in a crisis right now, or there could be a crisis in the next moment. Because when my husband laid down, we didn't think it was a perfect day. We didn't think it was going to end in a traumatic way, but it did. So we don't know what tomorrow brings.
So true. So true. I just want to leave everyone with, take your mental health seriously. It's not a joke. In this life, we all are going to have moments where we question our sanity, we're going to question our decisions, our actions, and we may dismiss it or play it off as, I was just going through something. I wasn't in my right mind. But let that sink in. Those two statements, I was going through something, I wasn't in my right mind. That's all the indicator you need to know that, hey, I need to catch it, check it, change it. I need to intervene now because something's going on that's out of my control. But if I intervene early, there's going to be hope. Know that you're loved. God loves you. He doesn't want to see you in any despair. He has created mental health professionals for this purpose so that there is an answer to your prayer. There's an answer to those tears that will be, dwelling in your ducts at that time. It's so important that we know that help is there. All you have to do is ask. So that's what I would like to leave everyone with, is just to really know you're loved. We can get through this together. You don't have to be silent.
Absolutely. And unashamed. Never be ashamed that you are challenged mentally for whatever reason. Do not be ashamed. Yes. Thank you, Dr.
Absolutely.
Mary Kay Matthews. Yes.
It's really good. Yeah. I guess with my closing remarks, there's the word fear, and that for some, if we break it down, that would be just they would forget everything and run. So don't be afraid. Take that fear and let's face everything and recover. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Know that there are people that are here to help you, and for especially for our community. And let me just specifically say to our Black males, there are us that out here that look like us, and you that are here for you to help with your needs. Do not be afraid to ask for help. There is somebody here for you. There's somebody willing to be there with you and guide you every step of the way. So don't allow that fear to have you to forget everything and run. Allow that fear that you have in you to face everything and recover and get to a better place in your life.
And I appreciate that, because a lot of times, as Dr. Mary Kay said, the Black and brown community, we shy away from this area of our health care, and we need to make sure that this is a priority too, because we're broken mentally and getting involved in relationships and broken, and then we're breaking people who we're connecting with, not only mentioning adults, but as we said earlier, the children are affected. We can't get to that financial level that we want to, because we're broken, and so our behavior prevents that from happening, because when we think about it, we probably could be millionaires when we think about it. So but if our behaviors are such that it won't allow that to take place, because we can't set a goal and we won't work towards it, we definitely need to attend to what may be challenging in our lives. And so I just know that you two are amazing. I want you to share something about your businesses. Um, let them know how to reach you, what services you provide. Would you all share that? I know, Dr. Matthews, you work now as a employee with the VA as well as ministry work. Tell them where, and if they're in your area, if they want to, come by your ministry, will you share that?
Absolutely. So, as far as the VA is concerned, every major state, city, we're located there for our veterans. And there are some dependent services too. So just go to www.va.gov and you can get linked up with the VA, nearest you. You do have to be enrolled. So just go to eligibility and enrollment. And then mental health services are free regardless of service connection. I get asked that question a lot. As far as ministry is concerned, I just want to encourage people too to go ahead and start mental health ministries in their churches, because the church is at the forefront. We need to be leading this conversation. We are a house of healing. So if you don't have that particular auxiliary ministry, please reach out. I'll give my personal email. I don't mind sharing that. It's drmkjohnson08@gmail.com. And you can just put Ask Dr. Mary Kay on that, the subject line. And I'll know that it's a question from, tonight's live stream. All right. But yes, we want to get those started. We want to make sure that we have individuals in our churches who are prepared to answer questions pertaining to mental health. It's not always a deliverance issue.
That is awesome.
Oh man, that's nice.
Awesome. Can I say amen and pass the plate?
Yeah. Yeah, I was getting my offering out now.
You all are too much. Too much.
Do the work. Everything cannot be done just through deliverance and prayer. We got to do some work.
Do the work. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. My turn?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, you're passing the mic. Okay. I get it now. All right. Everett Tolbert, licensed professional counselor. I am in the Southeast Georgia area. However, I can service all of Georgia through telehealth needs if need be. You can find me on my website, which is www.etolbertconsulting.com. I'm also listed in Psychology Today. You can also find me there as well. If you need to reach me, my number would be area code 912-342-4523. And I do individual, couples counseling. I service children, adolescents, as well as adults. So I'm open. I have availability now, but book me fast, because I do get booked up really fast because of the need. So I just again know that there are services available. Let's connect to that. I love what Dr. K said about the ministries. And matter of fact, I'm going to start reaching out to some of my ministerial friends to talk with them in reference to that piece as well, because I think that is important for us to connect to. I think that should be a community wraparound services. It takes a village to raise a child. Then it's going to take a village for us to sustain each other as well. So I'm with you on that.
Yes. You guys are amazing. And I just want to thank you for pouring your hearts out, because I think it's important for us to talk about this mental health state of being. People are going out and shooting people. I've never seen as much crime in my life, where people just don't care, have no regards for another person. And so we have got to make sure that we are somewhere, we've lost something somewhere. And we've got to figure out what to do to kind of change this trajectory of the path we're going on. And it may take another whole generation to do that. I'm not sure, but we've got to be willing to do the work. And like you said, Mr. Tolbert, go to the churches and talk to your ministerial friends and get with them, because you even see it with the ministers. who are committing suicide and things of that nature. So
Speak
we
on
have
it.
got to make sure we take this matter seriously.
Yeah.
Open your mouth and talk, ask for help. No matter what it is, ask for help, communicate, write it down if you can't talk to anybody, get it out of your system. Do the work. We have to do the work. So I just want to thank you all for sharing in this conversation with me. I'm sure there will be another one that we'll have in the future. And so I thank you for the opportunity to share the platform with you both this
Thank you
evening.
for having me. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank
Yes,
you so much.
this was
Pleasure is all
absolutely,
mine.
yes, this was absolutely amazing. So I just want to thank the audience for tuning in with us this evening. As always, remember, I love you, but God loves you most and He loves you best. Please tune in on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Next week, we will celebrate some dads because I think dads are important too. We celebrated moms in May, and so we get to celebrate dads in June. So, yes, Mr. Tolbert, we're going to
Hey,
celebrate some dads. So, I just want to say, um, have a wonderful evening to each and every one of you all watching this tonight. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Same place, same time. Have a good evening.